Well, hello again, everybody. This is John Norris at Trading Perspectives. As always, we have our good friends, Sam Clement and Courtney Trush. Y'all say hello.
How's it going?
Man, I'm doing fantastically. Thanks for asking. Now, guys, this is a big week for the markets. Here we are, the first week in August. We got a massive change in non-farm payrolls report coming up at the end of the week. However, what's weird is, for months now, people have been talking about recession and the dreaded R word. And are we in a recession? We've already had 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth or contraction. What's going on with the yield curve? We're seeing some inversion from overnights to 30 years, all that stuff. However, what's really even weirder than that is, I think the Street is expecting the U.S. economy to create over 250,000 jobs, created 372,000 jobs last month. Unemployment rates at 3.6%. And while they fell last month, there's still some 10.6, 10.7 million jobs out there. A million. And to put that in perspective. Million. Put that number in perspective, as I've said here, I think on this podcast previously, is, we live in Alabama, and everyone knows that. About 5.1 million people in the state of Alabama. And so throughout the U.S. economy, there are more than double the entire number of people living in the state of Alabama. That's how many jobs that are out there. Absolutely amazing. These numbers didn't even make sense prior to the pandemic. We have all those jobs available, wanting, can't find workers, and yet here we are talking about recession. Sam, something doesn't make sense.
Talking about if we're in a recession, we've said that is kind of missing the point a little bit, and whether we are or not, I mean, if we are, it's got to be one of the weirdest little recessions that there's ever been. I mean, the job market alone, I mean, you don't see that. Millions of people trying to hire someone and not being able to hire them in a recession.
Well, and I guess just to break it down too, right? I mean, when you have a recession, things are costing more. We have inflation. I guess, John, you probably know the numbers better than me, but it's roughly, 6.8% is what we're looking at right now, maybe?
It's actually a little bit higher than that in terms of the overall headline number, but there are various different inflation gauges. Let's just put it this way. Consumer prices are at their highest levels in some 40 years. It doesn't matter if you look at the PCE numbers, price deflator in the GDP report, the consumer price index, any of them.
Everything costs more.
Everything costs more. Sam, that's fair, don't you think?
That's absolutely fair.
Right, so that would make sense. If everything's costing more, then people are going to try to cut down on their labor expense and put more work maybe on the employees that they have to try to mitigate how much they're having to transfer to the consumer.
But historically, that would be the case. You're absolutely right, Courtney, but it seems like this time might be a little different because we still have that 10.6, 10.7 million jobs that are out there. And granted, I said that's down from the most recent highs, but these numbers just unbelievable. But typically, Courtney, you're right. In a recession, you try to squeeze as much as you can out of your productive employees. But now, I mean, we had lunch with a business owner yesterday. Said that, hey, things might be slowing down a little bit. I'm still understaffed.
And that's something that everyone has an anecdotal example of. I mean, everybody here knows someone who's saying, I can't find people. And it's not just, I think a lot of it is coming in that hourly, that $10 to $20 an hour, those kinds of jobs. That's obviously a massive, massive part of it. But you're seeing it along all parts of the job spectrum. I mean, I've even seen it for companies that are having trouble hiring CFOs right now. I mean, so it's not just that $10 to $20 an hour. It's bankers, it's lawyers, it's all these professions that people are having trouble filling these roles for.
So we know back in 2020, especially that $10 to $20 range, a lot of people were completely let go, and that you went from maybe a staff of 100 to a staff of 5 or whatever, just to keep the basics. But some companies completely shut down in that range. And those employees went and found other work and didn't necessarily come back. So do you think part of the demand is just solely based off of just trying to get back to that bare minimum level that they haven't been able to do in the last 2 years?
I would say that has to be at least part of the case. I mean, Sam, correct me if I'm way off, but we're still not completely back to pre-pandemic levels. The economy's been in expansion. Population just tends to grow, maybe not as quickly as it has in the past, but even so, we're still finding ourselves just with an acute worker shortage, as Sam said, throughout really all the economy, but really still, in my estimation, and just kind of the numbers which I consider, we're still really sort of that that 10 to 20, maybe $25 range is where we're finding at least the most obvious examples. You know, that's where all of a sudden, you know, people such as myself, maybe you all, that's what I notice the most. For instance, we're supposed to take a client out to lunch today, a particular restaurant of his choice, which historically has always been open on Wednesday for lunch, which is when we're recording this. And guess what? It's now no longer open for lunch on Wednesday, and the reason for it is staffing shortages. They can't get anyone to work for lunch on Wednesdays. And so when you see that type of thing, when you see help wanted signs in just about every sort of retail shop, every restaurant, all that's like gas stations, all that, that's when, you know, people go, talk about recession, and yet businesses are still looking for workers.
And you can see it in the data, too, that a lot of these people that were filling these jobs kind of moved up in the labor market, too,
Yes.
which is also a pretty good thing, I would say. You know,
Well,
people
that's
moving
historically what happens.
part-time hourly work to maybe a full-time salary job. That's typically not something that happens in a recessionary environment.
That's right.
All right, so I'm going to put a little bit of being cynical out there.
But you can't do that because we're
Well-
the cynical ones.
Yeah.
Well, I
Steal
guess
my shine.
when you're thinking about this, do you also think, okay, they probably don't make a whole lot during Wednesday at lunch either. So are they really closing because they can't find workers? Or are they doing it because their net profit isn't great? So they're like, we'll just close.
I do think things have changed a little, and you know, COVID did change things and change how consumers spend their money, the consumer patterns, and you know, I think you saw it with a lot of fast food restaurants. I mean, I saw a lot of them that continue to not reopen their inside to sit down for well past when everyone was still really freaking out about COVID. These things dragged on at a lot of restaurants that were only takeout or only drive-through and no seated dining. And I think you're right. I think consumers got used to that, first of all, and then the company's profits were probably a little bit better, and those margins were a little bit better, not having to clean anything inside and things like that. So I do think that has to be a part of it.
Well, I think for me personally, we just had, so some of my bushel of children go to daycare so that I can be here and record this wonderful podcast with you all. But
Why are you laughing? I think it's wonderful.
What's the joke
yeah,
about?
I know.
What's the joke? Taking this seriously.
Yes, of course. But the daycare, so I started looking at other options because our daycare had reduced hours still. 2 years after COVID, had the same reduced hours from COVID. And it's not really working to be able to work a 40-hour week when you have to be somewhere by a certain time and where normal businesses are still open. So looking at other options, I saw that there were a lot that had lower monthly cost and had longer hours, which were needed. There were some that were like astronomically more expensive as well. So it was a range. Well, we finally, you know, I made comments, was asking, obviously other parents were as well. So they've now said, hey, we're going to extend our hours back. Now, given we already pay more because of COVID cleaning and all of that, they increased rates multiple times, do that. They've now said, well, we're going to extend it back, not fully back to the hours that they used to be, but back enough where you now can work a 40-hour week. But we're going to have a one-time stipend because we can't hire, like because of inflation and the expenses of everything. And while I'm just happy for the normalcy, it also makes me mad, and I feel a little bit taken advantage of because I'm like, well, other locations are able to provide longer hours, same care, without having the stipend. But now for you to go back,
more for
right,
the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. And it just feels like a little bit like you're taking advantage because you know that I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place, and I'm just gonna have to suck it up and pay it.
I don't really know how to respond to that. I mean, maybe that's
This is becoming my griping session.
Okay. All right, Sam. What else do you think about this? Courtney has vented her spleen here on training
Courtney
perspective.
keep venting a little more. I'll
What
gather
else?
my thoughts.
Okay. What about that price of that creamer? Is that really you got your goat too?
Well, I mean, definitely you've seen people decide not to buy the premium goods.
But you are
when
having to
things are
pay.
tight.
People are having to pay more for essentially the same level of service. And I mean,
And-
restaurants still not opening. Some of these restaurants. I mean, here in town, Highlands Bar and Grill.
That's right.
Because they're not able. They have such a high expectation for, you know, service.
Yeah.
That if you're not able to get that, and that's still such a head scratcher to me.
It's a real head scratcher for me too.
That a restaurant that pretty pricey.
I mean, it's pretty pricey.
I think you get what you pay for there, but it's pretty pricey. It's hard to imagine that's not one of the
find
people that
workers.
Where 20% of a meal is very often, what, 40, 60, 80 bucks maybe? I mean, depending on how many people you're with. I mean, you can spend a lot of money there.
You can, if you listen.
Maybe not $1 million like Sam recently talked about.
Last year you were spending $1 million at lunch or what have you.
Yeah, that's right.
That's inflation, remember?
It's what I do. I'm just so generous.
But, particularly with that particular instance, I'm still kind of, here we are close to 2 years later, still can't find wait staff at that particular restaurant. I think even the primary bodega restaurant, I think is also kind of shut down for dinners as well. So, Courtney, in terms of your daycare, all of this is horribly confusing. And the business owner that we went to lunch with yesterday, and this isn't the first time I've heard this, said hard to find people just to show up for the interview. And when they show up, you might as well not even give them a drug test if you want them to stay. Huge amounts of a certain type of worker, when they do show up, can't pass very basic drug screens.
Well, and we've talked for, I guess, better part of 2 years how the who has the upper hand in negotiating and the employment, it's changed from the employer to the employee.
Yes, without a doubt.
I mean, person we were with yesterday again talked about how you can't do drug screenings anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, well, 3 years ago you would have said, no, this is what I do, and you got to pass these qualifications, whether it's education, background, what have you. And now it's like, hey, if you'll show up, fantastic, you're hired.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, being on both sides of that with child care, if it's getting a babysitter, you're just like, please, just like keep them alive. Like, I just need a minute to myself. Or is it
Mother of the Year award?
Yeah, I know. I know.
I need a minute to myself.
I just remember,
Please keep them breathing.
we talk about work ethic and the younger generations, and I don't think that.
Wait a second. Are you going to start talking about the younger generations and their lack of work ethic?
No, I'm talking about.
Go.
Well, you were kind of hitting on that right now. Is that those workers expect a lot. They don't want to be held necessarily to a higher standard because they're just like, well, you need me more than I need you, so I'll just go find something else. And I'll keep rotating in and out of jobs, and it doesn't matter to me. And again, employers can't be like, well, you've changed jobs 3 times in the last year, so I'm not going to hire you. They're going to be like, thank you. You're a warm body I need at the register, or whatever that is. And for me, I just remember coming out of college and just being so desperate for someone to hire me, and feeling like just so grateful that I even got an interview, and so great, making sure that I had done every last thing by the book that was expected. And it is, you can't help but be like, well, in my day, that would have never,
Well, I mean, service level has undoubtedly gone down in a lot of areas, a lot of places. I mean, everyone's noticed it. It's like, the service, like, I can't get a drink refilled for 25 minutes or what have you.
You're expected to tip 20% regardless.
Yeah.
Because you should be thankful that they're just there. That they're breathing
that's
in
what
a
I'm
warm
saying.
body.
It's detrimental.
You really sound like maybe you've got your Irish up. I mean, you're going up and prancing around.
I think I'm losing the most cynical title of this group.
You still are the most cynical for your generation.
I'll take that.
So, I mean, Courtney, I don't know what to tell you. You're just going to have to suck it up and woman up and and pay the higher prices. By God, you're just going to have to do it.
And be thankful that you just have. I mean, and I get, like, servers might have 6 tables instead of 4 tables, and they're in the weeds, as they say in the biz. But I just don't feel like I should have to. You just can't even trust that someone's going to give you, like, the highest level. And when you do, just get the bare basics. You're so appreciative. And it doesn't look like, John, I mean, based off the numbers that you've shared with us, it seems like this is going to be the norm, at least probably through the end of the year.
Oh, I'd say probably even a little longer than that. We've talked about the Great Resignation previously, but I really do think a certain level of worker, and Sam's right, there are job openings throughout the entire economy that are hard to fill. We've got particular professional career level jobs here that we're having a hard time finding the right candidates, frankly. Love to have them, nothing to do with us. It's just trying to find unicorns in some regards. Hard to find previously, almost impossible now. But there is I tell people this when you're kind of wondering why there aren't enough people at the Burger King, why there aren't enough people maybe at the daycare. why there aren't enough people sweeping the floors, why you can't find housekeepers. I mean, I've read a number of different articles. You can't get people to change bed linen, all that type of stuff. I kind of tell people to take a look at their phone and pull up Uber Eats, pull up DoorDash, pull up Shipt, Instacart, any number of different things. And I think a certain level of worker, that hourly workers, low semi-skilled workers, are substituting the gig economy. This is my estimation, substituting the gig economy for more formal sort of work that they would have had in the past, where they were beholden to a time clock or what have you. Now people can kind of work for themselves and have their own flexible hours, and that's something that I think a lot of particular jobs, the lower end sort of hourly jobs, are just really going to struggle to compete with the app or the gig work. I mean, Sam, you and I've talked about that. Am I just completely off base with that?
No, but I almost, I think it causes, like friction in those parts of the labor market, but things like that amount of friction, I think, can be a net positive in the long run. This having to compete for labor, if people are not beholden to these $10 to $20 an hour jobs as much, that can create innovation. I mean, frictional unemployment leads to innovation over the long run.
So we'll have like self-driving cars that will come and deliver our
Or you'll have these more automatic kiosks, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. Again, that causes some frictional unemployment, but that's what creates innovation.
Yeah.
I think ultimately, probably what Sam said, more so than the driverless cars showing up with your meal, because I'd still have to get off the couch.
Walk to the car. I mean, oh my gosh, that's too much.
What is the value add in that? I still have to go walk down to the street, pick up my food that someone else prepared for me. But I do think what we will see, in more densely populated, higher wage metropolitan areas, San Francisco, New York, some other type of stuff, you have seen things like the order kiosk, the self-service kiosk. And it's not necessarily just a big standalone thing. When I was in Philadelphia, was it last year, the year before that? I guess it was last year. I went to, there's a restaurant called Honey Grow, and shout outs, free publicity for the folks at Honey Grow. It's just a little tablet right there at the counter. Type in exactly what I want. I pay straight there, and they call me when my food's ready. So they had no cashiers, no sort of
no even server.
No even servers, just people making the food. And once they make the food, there you have it. And I thought, this is genius, because these people are down to like 3 people making food. They don't have any server. They don't have any cashiers. They don't have any all that type. And it was just absolutely fantastic. And the food was delicious. Absolutely
Did they
fantastic.
prompt you to tip? Did you have a tip option?
Well, of course. I mean, and tips have gone through the roof. I mean,
those tablets, as soon as you see a place that has a tablet that flips over, you just know they're going to ask for a tip for something that probably previously didn't have a tip.
Yeah, without a doubt. So we're going to see a heck of a lot more of that type of thing, I think. And so we're going to be putting a lot of cashier jobs, a lot of sort of front of staff type of people. Those people will probably be, those jobs are just going away because of that frictional
even self-checkouts, which have been around for a while. But, I worked at self-checkout when I worked in college at Home Depot, and I was then able to help 6 to 8 people at one time check out. So what previously probably would have been 2 to 3 registers worth, now it's one person doing that.
Well, there's a woman at the local Piggly Wiggly, the one over in Crestline. Her name's Miss Linda. And if you listen to this, you probably know who Miss Linda is. She's been working for the Pig for a long period of time. And they were incented, or someone, the store manager, assistant store manager, when they opened up their 2 or 3 checkout self-checkout lines over there at the Crestline Piggly Wiggly, they had their cashier say, "Have you noticed the self-checkout? You should try that out." All this, that, and the other thing. I said, maybe Miss Linda, I like going through you, because I didn't want to tell Miss Linda that, you know something, if everyone goes to self-checkout line, you're out of a job, Miss Linda. So didn't want to tell her that type of thing. So, but you're starting to see more and more firms move in that direction. So a lot of those end jobs are just going away. In terms of housekeepers and things like that, people working in fast food restaurants, I mentioned the kiosk, probably get to some sort of automatic food preparation system. I don't know what we're going to do about changing bed linens.
Yeah, I guess you have to do it yourself.
I'm not doing it. I don't like doing it at my own house.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a fan. I don't do it too often.
When you talk about the Great Recession, or I'm sorry, the Great Resignation, Great Resignation, do you think that part of that will ever come back, or is part of it also just the age demographic of people retiring either at retirement age or early, and they're never planning to
I
return?
think there's been some structural changes that probably may come back, but not. I think it's very cyclical. I think you're seeing large groups of people being comfortable again with a single income household that for a long period of time hasn't been the case, but was very much the norm several decades ago. And I think some of those things are in a larger cyclical environment.
I always hesitate to say this time is different because I find out that this time is not as different as I thought it was. I do think there's some structural issues, but for the labor market to be this tight for the remainder of my life, I don't think that's likely the case. We're going through a very strange period of time where we got some shifts going on. As Sam mentioned, structural. I mean, the gig economy, the apps on the phones. Just that we had this pandemic where older people got out of the workforce and people moved up, and then there are not enough people at the bottom. So it's almost a perfect storm in a lot of regards. Why we're having all these jobs being open, that will eventually work their way through, but it's not going to happen by the end of this year.
I agree.
What do you think, Courtney?
No, that's a good answer.
So-
I didn't know. That's why I asked y'all.
So I don't know what to tell you about your daycare.
Well, I think that's part of why you have the Great Recession, for sure, based off just the
Well,
cost of
the-
childcare, for sure.
Resignation?
Sorry, I said recession again? Mm-hmm. It's because I'm looking at a sheet of paper that says recession. My bad.
As long as it doesn't impact Courtney's ability to
Sausage and creamer.
sausage and creamer. There you have it. Well, guys, thank y'all so much. We always love to hear from you. Also, if you have any questions or comments, please, by all means, let us know. You can always drop us a line at tradingperspectives@oakworth.com, or you can leave us a review on the podcast outlet of your choice. As always, if you're interested in reading more, hearing more of what we have to say or how we think, please, by all means, go to oakworth.com and take a look underneath the Thought Leadership tab for all kinds of exciting information. With that, I'm going to give you guys last chances on this topic.
That's all I got.
That's it, John.
That's all I've got today, too. Y'all take care.